What's up? So you guys all know that I shoot a lot of action sports photography, and so that's what today's episode is going to be talking about. When it comes to shooting sports photography, things are moving so fast that you don't always have time to think about what my shutter speed needs to be, what my aperture needs to be, and what my ISO needs to be for the correct exposure, plus to be able to still capture the fast moving action. So here's some tips. All right. So normally, this is kind of crazy because I've kind of found myself shooting with the Canon 85 1.4 lens for some sports photography stuff. Now, if I have subjects that are moving really fast at me, I will not be using this lens because this still has a tendency to focus kind of slow or on the slower side of things. This does have the focusing motor that the new 70-200 version 3 has, but it still has more heavy glass in it than the 70-200. So it's not as quick. Now, that said, do not try to use the 85 1.2 f-stop lens to shoot action sports. You're gonna end up with maybe 1 or 2 shots in focus and everything else is gonna be blurry. But with that in mind, I do sometimes still shoot action sports photography with this lens. Usually if my subjects are moving back and forth across this way and more not coming straight at me, because this will maybe tend to lose focus when you're shooting with it. With that in mind, I'm gonna switch this lens. All right, so action sports photography, before you question anything I'm going to tell you, just know the San Francisco 49ers photographer shoots an Aputure priority. So, but next time you're at a ball game, football, basketball, volleyball, or you're shooting gymnastics or any other action sports photography, because this applies to the majority of the ski photography that I shoot and the mountain biking, not so much the rock climbing, but still sometimes. And then I'm trying to think of some other sports stuff. Those are the first that come to mind, but whether you're shooting a triathlon, some swimming stuff, it doesn't really quite matter really what you're shooting, but the majority of your seasoned professional photographers you're going to find that they shoot in aperture priority mode more often than not. It's either aperture priority mode or manual. The reason my preference for shooting in aperture priority mode is I tend to have more, something's gonna be in autofocus or in auto, okay? And I say that because so many people are like, well, you need to learn how to shoot manual. Yes, learn how to shoot manual. I'm not disregarding that. But once you know the fundamentals, understanding how auto settings can help you not worry or stress over things that would otherwise keep you from missing the shot. So there's the automatic settings are there for a reason. Learn why they're there for a reason and learn how you can use them to your advantage. Now, why I say that is because I usually shoot in aperture priority mode when I'm shooting 90% of the sports photography I shoot, whether it be the mountain biking, the rock climbing, skiing, and then going into the college sports that I've shot in the past, it's aperture priority mode for me. And the reason for that is basically I can choose my exposure compensation and change the meter that way in whichever way that I'd like it there, but then also put the ISO where I want it, which helps me with editing later for batch editing, especially if you're shooting 3,000 to 4,000 to 5,000 images in a night at a game and you're gonna select 50 of them. Those 50 are gonna be consistent with the other 3,000 to 5,000. When you shoot in aperture priority mode, you're basically telling the camera just to select the needed shutter speed for the correct exposure. So for me, usually I'm selecting a low f-stop from 2.0 to f4, so f2 to f4, and then on top of that, then depending on the lighting of my environment is where I'm gonna put my ISO. What I'm doing when I do that is I'm selecting the desired, like first off, the priority is my f-stop. What f-stop do I want? Low, obviously. Sometimes, occasionally, I'll shoot with a high f-stop, and that's for to get like a skier coming down a mountain, like this photo here, and having all the scenery behind in focus, and maybe a star effect with the sun or what have you, you know. So there's reasons to shoot with a high, but shooting in aperture priority mode gives me the ability to quickly change that and not worry about all my other settings, and knowing that I'm gonna have a correct exposure, especially when you have an athlete waiting on you to get the desired shot. You're gonna kind of get a feel for this, and the more you shoot this way, the more you'll understand why this helps you. But if I'm indoors in a gym, my ISO is gonna range from 1250 to 6400, usually not any higher than that if I can avoid it. And I'm just gonna let my shutter speed do the what it needs to or wants to. When I'm shooting that, my ISO is going to be determined by the shutter speeds that I see as I move my camera around the room. So if I'm in a gym, right, I'm just gonna hold my shutter down and I'm gonna move it around and go, okay, my shutter speed's going from, right now you can see it, it's 1/1200ths of a second. So I could go with a little bit of a higher ISO. If I want a little more sensitivity, I go to 2500 and I'm getting 1/2000ths of a second. Kind of depends on the motion blur that you're wanting to try and capture or acquire out of those images. That's probably the only time that I'll switch it over to shutter priority, is if I'm going for a specific blurred photo image, and that's usually acquired or captured usually at a racetrack when I have like a straight panning shot, or maybe a track team. Certain shots where your racers or your action sports, whatever it is moving pretty much on a horizontal plane. Next is, oftentimes people are always worried about what their white balance should be. I generally, now I'm starting to use the auto white balance settings more as these cameras have come out with technology. They just do an accurate job. In the past, they didn't used to always get it really well. Anymore, the auto white balance is pretty much spot on or really close to where you want it. I used to shoot in Kelvin. I used to shoot with the Kelvin, and I would select the desired straight Kelvin scale number that I wanted for the images, but rarely do I do that. All right, let's talk autofocus. I'm selecting the autofocus points that I want so that I can like use the rule of thirds when shooting action sports photography or whatnot, so that I can kind of have a really cool composition and have empty space on the left or the right. And the more you do that, the more intuitive it is. That's one thing that I will not let the camera select. I picked up a buddy's camera the other day, and I was like, whoa, dude, you know, he had he let the camera select what was gonna be in focus, and I don't want to say that, you know, you can't do that, because a lot of the cameras nowadays are coming out with face detection. But when you have multiple faces on a court or on a track, you're gonna want to be selective on the person that you're taking a photo of more often than not. And so having that face detection is great when you're shooting one person or two people only. But when you're shooting a team, you have 5 guys within your frame, you need to compose that shot the way that you want and not leave that to the camera. Man, I could go deeper and deeper in this, but generally and I'm sure there's other videos out there, so I'm not even gonna like full on attempt this yet, because I just kind of wanted to briefly go over the basics and some misconceptions that people think with their shutter speed, aperture, and all of that. But really just dive into your camera's autofocus settings. More often than not, the reason you're not getting the shot is not the camera's fault. It's more often than not the photographer. And so there's different settings in here for different scenarios. Now, just as this has it, you know, instantly focus on subject, suddenly entering the autofocus points. So if you have someone that's gonna come from your right to left and you don't see them, but you know that they're gonna come in there, you can be holding that shutter down with the with AI servo, of course, have them enter the shot and capture it, and you're gonna get the shot when the people automatically enter that shot. You know, at the end of the day, you know, getting familiar with your camera equipment, learning the focus settings, practicing on your friends, ball games, different scenarios, because everything that you shoot is going to be different. Mountain biking is going to be different than volleyball. Race cars is going to be different than basketball. Football is going to be different than skiing. And really, to get really diverse in the images that you capture, you really need to be using your equipment on a regular basis, going to a game and shooting with it without, you know, maybe you're not getting paid, but if you're not out there shooting with your equipment, how can you get paid to do something that you don't know how to do? If you haven't yet, please subscribe to this channel so you can get notified every time I do upload. You gotta hit that bell button. And yeah, if you're here from one of my other social media platforms, whether that be TikTok, my podcast, or Instagram, please comment, let me know where you're here from. That'd be awesome. And if you haven't seen some of those other platforms and you're willing to, please go check them out. Links are in the description below. I appreciate you guys. Help me help you and help me grow this account. Please subscribe, get those subscriptions up, and you guys are awesome. Appreciate it. Thanks. All right, so I really need to be writing a paper right now because it's finals week, and I'm out here making a YouTube channel or YouTube video for my channel for you guys, because what's more important, that stupid paper or you guys?